So if you're looking to improve yourself as a person, or maybe as a mother, a father, or just anybody that has influence, and you're trying to figure out how do I do better at just influencing others, then you don't want to miss this year's Leadership Summit. And LCBC has been a part of the Global Leadership Summit for probably 15, 16, 17 years now. And I've got to tell you, I've never been as excited about this year's lineup of teachers than I am now. And this year, LCBC is actually going to be hosting the summit on 16 of our campuses. And so several of our campuses, Clark Summit, Wilkes-Barre, Dixon City, you're going to be hosting the summit for the very first time, and I think you're in for a treat as this year's summit comes around. This is an event, it's an opportunity to join hundreds of thousands of other people around the world to hear and learn from some of the top leaders around the world, and it's an opportunity for personal growth that I don't think you want to miss out on. And so for me, I never want to miss the summit because it never fails to just infuse me with energy and passion and new ideas and just how to be a better person or a better leader, a better husband, a better dad. And so, man, this is one of the primary ways that we say, here's a way to just grow personally as a church. And so I hope you'll make plans to be a part of this year's summit. If you've never been to the summit, then this is the year to sign up. If you've been, but it's been a while since you've been, then it's a time to come back and join probably 3,000 or so other people from LCBC on August 4th and 5th. So it's a Thursday, Friday, and you need to go ahead and plan for it now. And invite a friend, invite a coworker or a family member to come along with you. Now's the time to sign up, and you can actually sign up for a discounted price up until the end of this week. And so I would just encourage you to make the decision now to go ahead and sign up for the summit. Well, last summer I actually did something that I thought I would never do. I actually was involved in writing a book, and I've tried to write a book once before, probably about 15, 16 years ago, and it was a disaster, and I thought I was excited about it. Our board gave me a 6-week sabbatical to say, okay, you can have time to try to write, and about 3 days into the exercise, I called, I think it was Jim, who was our board chairman at the time, and I said, please let me come back to work. Don't make me write this book. This is awful. I hate this. And so he said, you don't have to come back. You can still have 6 weeks off, but you don't have to write the book either. And I was so thankful for that. But then something happened about 3 years ago that kind of rocked my world. Ruth and I happened to be out of town, and it was a Wednesday evening, and we were having dinner with a person that I would consider to be a mentor of mine, somebody that has impacted me greatly, somebody that's actually impacted our church here at LCBC greatly. And there were only about 5 or 6 of us at this dinner, and we were just enjoying conversation over a great meal. And it was one of those experiences where, you probably had it before, where you have an experience and you just can't wait to get back and tell other people, can you believe I had this kind of experience? And I couldn't wait to come back home on Monday and come into the office and just tell everybody about this wonderful experience that Ruth and I had with this friend, this mentor of mine. But before I was able to even get back into the office on Monday morning, the news broke that this person, this friend that we had just spent this magical evening with, was actually being accused of inappropriate behavior by multiple people. And I just thought, how could this be? And I was devastated by the news. And as I listened to the accusations that were piling up against him, I found myself just shaking my head and just asking the question, what was he thinking? I mean, how could he possibly get into this situation? And so several days later, I met with a friend of mine here at LCBC. His name is Rob Skasel. Rob has served on our staff years ago. And Rob's a psychologist. He serves now as a business psychologist. He works primarily with business leaders. And I wanted to meet with Rob to just ask him the question, how could somebody so smart, how could somebody that has so much influence, how could somebody that's so responsible, how could he make such irresponsible decisions as my friend had made? And I said, Rob, what was going on in my friend's mind that caused him to think that this behavior was somehow acceptable? And I mean, how could he possibly have come to the conclusion that he was making a good decision or a series of good decisions? I mean, didn't he consider the ramifications of his decisions? Didn't he think about how this was going to impact his marriage, his family, his kids, his job, his church, and all the other people that he's influenced over the years? I mean, didn't he consider the risk involved with the behavior that he was involved in? And a few weeks later, I actually watched this friend resign from his leadership position. As I watched him walk off the stage of his church for the very last time, with his head hung low, and the question that just kind of kept ringing through my ears was, what was he thinking? How could he possibly made some kind of these decisions? And truthfully, it was one of the saddest moments that I can recall, at least in an area of just leadership and friendship. And so that whole situation kind of left me wondering, what can I do for myself personally? What can we all do to ensure that we're making better decisions so that we don't end up in a similar situation as my friend? I mean, is there a way to make better decisions so we don't fall like he did? And so Rob Scasel and I began working together last summer, and we wrote a book, and it's entitled, What Was I Thinking? And the whole purpose of the book is to provide a model to make wise decisions and keep us from having to ask ourselves the question, what was I thinking when I made that decision? Now, the book was actually released last Wednesday, and you can pick up a copy in our atriums today, or really from any book distributor if you're interested. And if you like it, do us a favor and go to Amazon.com and write a review. If you don't like it, then just keep your thoughts to yourself and don't tell anybody else about it. Actually, it was real fun for a few days on Amazon. And again, you could come up with any category you want. And so they've got categories and listings. And so for a few days, it was the #1 new release Christian leadership book. I think now it's dropped to #3, but just kind of fun. And so let me tell you why it's important to figure out how to make wise decisions. You need to know how I need to know how to make better decisions, because we make hundreds, if not thousands of decisions every day. And it doesn't matter who you are. You and I, we're constantly making decisions, which means before our eyes even open in the morning, we're making decisions. Before our feet even hit the floor, we're making decisions. I mean, am I going to hit the snooze button? Am I going to hit it again? Is it going to be Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts? Is it, what am I eating for lunch? Actually, a study by Cornell University, they found that we make, on average, 226.7 decisions every day just about food. And I hear that number, and I go, I think that's kind of low. I think about food a whole lot more than that. And then some of the decisions that we're involved in are more intense and more involved than that. I mean, should I express my anger, my disappointment in my son for once again missing curfew? Or do I mention to my wife that her car needs gas and that she's on empty, or do I wait and let her discover that for herself? Is it Cowboys or is it Eagles? And actually, that's an easy decision to make. And then there are those life-altering decisions about what job, what career choices am I going to make? Am I going to pursue? Who do I marry? Who do I date? Do I want to have children? Is it Democrat, Republican, or independent? Or what part is God going to play in my life? And here's what's fascinating to me, and here's why I think it's so important that we make good decisions and that we become good decision makers, because we never know what, or we never know who is going to be impacted by the decisions that we make. We don't know who or what hangs in the balance of our decisions, and we don't know who our decisions are going to impact. We don't even know how they're going to impact us, but what we do know is that our decisions determine the direction and the quality of our lives. And see, the interesting thing about decisions is you're not the only one who's impacted by your decisions. And you're not the only person impacted by the regrets that you have when you make negative decisions. And in fact, you have no idea who ultimately is going to be affected by your decisions. And some of the decisions that you and I make today are going to impact our descendants, people that we will never meet, but it will impact them, and they'll impact stories of people for years to come. And so think about your own life. Think about your parents, your grandparents, and had they decided things differently, how you would be different even today. I mean, think about how would it impact your life today, and what about your kids? Or if you plan to have kids someday, how do you think the decisions you're making right now will impact their lives in the future? And so for better or worse, our lives have been impacted by somebody else's decisions. And I mean, maybe your life would be different if your dad had made the decision to stop picking up the bottle of alcohol, or maybe your life would be very different if your mom had decided she's not going to run off and leave you and your family. But then the opposite is true as well. What if your dad had conquered his struggles with alcohol and he kept the family together? What if your mom had decided to stay together and be one of those families that she's going to hold it together instead of walking away? And the point is, we never know who or what hangs in the balance of the decisions that we're making. And every decision we make has consequences, and none of our decisions are neutral. And there's something else, though, we need to understand about the importance of the decisions that we make and making good decisions. You see, every decision that we make, it brings along risk. There's always risk associated or attached with our decisions. And with every decision we make, there's going to be risk involved, and risk oftentimes involves danger. It could involve harm or loss, and bottom line, risk involves consequences, which is why so many of us, as we were kids, we were taught to avoid risk at all cost. And do anything you can to avoid risk. And a lot of us were programmed to just associate risk with harm or injury and loss. And so as a result, we've kind of gone through life just becoming, as a kid, risk adverse and thinking, oh, risk is bad, and if I step out and do something risky, then I'm gonna end up being hurt. But what's interesting is there's actually an upside to risk as well. And here's the thing, in order to reach our full potential, we actually have to get comfortable with risk, and we've got to be taking risk. Playing it safe is not gonna help us reach our full potential, and it's not gonna bring us success in life. And for instance, I have a 6-month-old grandson, and for him, very soon he's gonna be learning to walk, and that's gonna be a very high priority for him. And then I think of all the risk associated with babies learning to walk, and I want to protect them, but I know that he's got to take those risks if he's ever going to learn to walk, and I want my grandson to excel at walking and running. And I have a 2.5-year-old granddaughter, and she's taking swim lessons right now, and there's all kinds of risk, especially in her mind, of letting go of the edge of the pool. There's all kinds of risk of letting go of her daddy in the water, but if she ever wants to learn to swim, then she's got to learn to let go. And she is learning to let go. And see, making decisions is a natural part of our lives. And without taking risk, then we're not going to make any forward progress. And if we have this aversion to risk, then it just produces mediocrity in us. And so how do we learn to make decisions that we can move forward? And I like what King Solomon actually says. He's talking about risk and how it tends to paralyze us. And so he said, farmers who wait for perfect weather, they never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest, meaning if they don't step out and take a risk, they're not ever gonna get anything done, and meaning life is not without risk. And so forward momentum, if we're gonna move forward in life, it requires both this willingness and this ability to take risk. And so one day Jesus actually told a story about taking risk. And so let me ask you to grab a Bible and let's just read Jesus' story on taking risk. It's found in Matthew 25. If you don't have a Bible with you, there's some of the seats around you. I'd love for you to grab it. I'll tell you the page number. It's page 756, Matthew 25. I want to look at what Jesus has to say about this whole issue of taking risk. And if you open up your Bible app on your phone, you can follow along as well. And Jesus is actually telling a story about a wealthy man who puts his money into the hands of 3 individuals, and each of the 3 receive a portion of this rich man's money, and then they head out of town on a long trip. And when the rich man returns home, he quickly calls these 3 individuals together, and he just asks them to give an account of his money. What have you done with my money? Where's my money? And the first 2 individuals, they step forward and they declare that because they took risk on some wise investments, they've actually been able to double the rich man's money, which is extraordinary. The third individual, he took a whole different approach though. He decided that rather than risk losing any of the rich man's money, he was actually gonna eliminate all the risk. He was gonna play it safe, and he was simply gonna bury the money in the ground and then return it to the owner when it was time. And so look at Matthew 25. Let me begin reading verse 14 in the story that Jesus tells. It says, again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by a story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities. And then he left on his trip. The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. The servant with 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. After a long time, the master returned from his trip and called them together to give an account of how they had used his money. The servant who had been trusted the 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, Master, my 5 bags of silver to invest, I have earned 5 more. Now let me just stop for a second and just say, Jesus gives 2 very different responses to this whole thing of making decisions and taking risks. The individual two individuals actually take risk, and they double the man's money. That's what we're reading about now. But the third is more risk adverse. He decides he's going to play it safe. He decides that he's not going to do anything. He's going to bury it, make sure nothing happens to it, and kind of thinks, you know what, nothing gained, nothing lost, we're okay. And so as I was reading the story, I tried to figure out, okay, if I were in this story, which one would I be? Would I be the two that are risk takers? Would I be the one that's more risk adverse? And I'd like to think that I would be one of the two that doubled the money. But if I'm honest, there's a lot of times when I find myself being risk adverse, and I've never jumped out of an airplane. I have no desire to jump out of an airplane. I mean, maybe some of you like the idea of experiencing this adrenaline rush that goes with jumping out of an airplane, but I have no desire to take unnecessary risk or chances. I mean, why would I? Why would I go out of my way to experience pain or potential harm or loss? And I think back to when I was a kid. I was never a kid that accepted dares. I mean, you could dare me anything. I'm not going to do it. Why would I do that? Why would I potentially harm myself just because you're daring me to do so? Or I go to middle school, and I think about middle school, and man, I can't believe now that I used to roller skate when I was in middle school, but at the roller rink, there would be couples-only skates, and I was never, ever one that got off the wall and went and asked a girl to go skate me. Man, why would I do that? Why would I risk the shame of being rejected? And so I would be smashed against the wall, or I'd be hiding in the concession line, but I wasn't going to take a risk on that. And how about you? Do you find yourself, are you a person that tends to be more risk-adverse, or do you tend to be a risk-taker? And I mean, for some of us, the answer is always play it safe. Always play it safe. Then there are those that just kind of gravitate toward risk. And I'm just curious, how many of you would say you tend to be more risk adverse? You tend to play it safe most of the time? Okay, so a lot of you. How about those of you that would say, yeah, I tend to jump out of airplanes if I can? So more of you than I would think. Fools, but no, you're not. That's good. It's interesting to think about that. And you know, what we need to remember about risk is that risks are not one-dimensional. Risks are very two-sided. Risk involve both threats, but they also involve opportunities, and it has the potential for positive and negative outcomes. And so those of us that are risk-averse, we tend to miss out sometimes on positive opportunities. Those that tend to be more gravitating toward risk, you just need to remember there are consequences sometimes to the decisions that you make. But in order to reach our full potential in life, we can't just play it safe. We can't completely eliminate risk from our lives. And so let's go back to Matthew 25. Let me begin reading again in verse 19. The rich man responds with praise to the two that doubled his money. And so again, verse 19. After a long time, their master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they had used his money. The servant to whom he had entrusted the 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 5 more. The master was full of praise. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful handling this small amount, so now I'll give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. The servant who had received the 2 bags of silver came forward and said, Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 2 more. The master said, well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's go and celebrate. And he gives this high praise to the 2 that have taken risk. And he's excited about that. But then the rich man comes to the one who has been risk adverse. And it's interesting what he says. Look at verse 24. Then the servant with 1 bag of silver came and said, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look here is your money back. But the master replied, and if I can paraphrase in just a couple of words what the master says to this guy, I think what he's saying is, what were you thinking? What were you thinking, you wicked and lazy servant? If you knew that I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest out of it. I go, what in the world were you thinking? And I think this third guy had a reasonable answer. He says, I'll tell you what I was thinking. I was thinking you're a harsh man. I was thinking that I didn't want to risk losing what's yours. I was thinking I wanted to play it safe and do nothing. I was thinking it's not worth the risk, and so I'm just going to step back. And it all seemed logical as you listen to his explanation, and logical maybe. But Jesus actually says acceptable Apparently not. I mean, he lays into him, you wicked and lazy person. At least you could have put my money in the bank and I could have drawn interest. And there's no praise for the guy that just played it safe. There's no celebration for playing it safe. Instead, all future responsibility is removed from him. And the story ends, verse 29. Jesus says, to those who use well what they're given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. And clearly Jesus is saying, look, you and I are expected to do something with the talents, with the abilities that God has given to us, the resources he's given us, and that involves taking risk. Now, it's easy to find lots of examples of people who took risk and did well. It's interesting to find examples of people who took risk and didn't do so well. It's harder to find examples of people who just played it safe. And I think the reason why it's hard to find examples of people that played it safe and then what happened next is we never know what would happen. When we play it safe, we don't know what we missed. We don't know what opportunities were out there. We don't know what we would have gained had we gone ahead and taken that risk. We'll never know what we miss if we only play it's safe. And I did find one example though, and let me just ask you, how many of you have heard of the Eastman Kodak Company? How many of you are familiar with that name? Okay, so all of us that are over the age of 50, we know the name of Eastman Kodak. The Eastman Kodak Company was actually founded in 1888, and over the next century, they produced and made cameras, and they made them available pretty much to every household in the world, so much so that by 1968, Kodak actually captured 80% of the global market in the field of photography. I mean, they owned photography around the world. 1975, a man by the name of Steve Sasson, he was an electrical engineer at Kodak, and he actually invented the digital camera. And when Steve told his bosses about this invention, their response was basically, I mean, that's nice, but let's just kind of keep this quiet. Let's not tell anybody about this, because they were fearful that this new technology would actually cut into their profitable sales on things like film and printing sheets. And so Kodak flat out rejected this idea of this new digital camera. And because they ignored the new technology and because they failed to adapt to the changing market dynamics, soon a Japanese company by the name of Fuji Films came along, and all of a sudden they captured the market and they began to produce and make digital cameras, and they left Kodak behind in the race. And so for 10 years, Kodak actually tried to convince people that film cameras were better than digital cameras. And they had this idea, they were just sure that people loved to be able to hold and feel the pictures in front of them on a printed image, and as opposed to viewing an image on a screen. And by the time Kodak understood their mistakes and started to sell and just produce digital cameras, it was too late. 2013, Kodak actually filed for bankruptcy. And we look now, and you look back at that, and you go, what were they thinking? I mean, it's obvious now. And what they were doing is they were playing it safe. And there's a danger. There's a danger in playing it safe. So, if every decision that we make has consequences, how do we learn to become good decision makers? How can we learn not to take foolish risk? I mean, is it possible to make good decisions, to take wise risk like the two individuals in Jesus' story? Is it possible to avoid making bad decisions and taking foolish risk like my friend, my mentor, who involved himself in inappropriate behaviors? And is it possible to move beyond doing nothing and missing out on opportunities like Eastman Kodak Company or the third individual in Jesus' story? I've got to tell you up front, unfortunately, there's no tool, there's no strategy that guarantees 100% of the time you're going to make a good decision. But I will say there are tools, there are strategies that greatly increase those odds. And so that's what we're going to be looking at over the next several weeks. Over the next several weeks, I want to give you a Bible-based strategy that will actually increase your odds of making a wise decision and decrease the odds of finding yourself shaking your head and thinking, what in the world was I thinking? And over the next several weeks, I want to introduce to you a model of decision making that actually provides you with a valuable path for thinking through tough decisions. And I want to give you a model for decision making that doesn't just rely on your gut and doesn't just rely on feelings. And so often we make our decisions based on how I feel about a situation. Just what does my gut tell me? And sometimes that works, but sometimes that's dangerous. And is there a way to have a thoughtful response in making decisions? And here's what you need to know. Every one of us has the ability to be a good decision maker. Bottom line, the ability to make good decisions and take wise risk are just skills that we can break them down and just refine them until you or your children or your employees or your board members or your spouse or any of us are able to excel at making good decisions and taking wise risk. And so we'll start that next week. But until next week, I actually want to give you a head start on making good decisions and taking wise risks, because between now and next weekend, you're going to make hundreds and thousands of decisions, and some of which may be life-altering. Some of you right now, you're facing decisions about your job. You're facing decisions about your career. You're facing decisions about your family. Some of you right now are trying to decide, who do I date? Who do I actually marry? Some of you are trying to decide, do I ever want to have children? Or you may be deciding, what part does God play in my life, if any part at all? So let me give you some advice and just encouragement as you're making decisions this week. And when I tell you this first piece of advice, you're gonna go, oh, this seems so obvious. This isn't a big deal. David, we should know this. But the first thing I would just encourage you is to invite God into the decision-making process from the very start. Invite God into the process and ask him. Say, God, give me the necessary insight to take an honest look at myself and my situation as I face decisions. Or ask him, God, help me see opportunities that they're not readily coming to my mind, and ask him to help you find wise counsel and support to challenge you in your decision making. I know that all seems so obvious, but as I think about the decisions that I make and how often I jump into a decision and I make it and I don't even think about God, and then down the road I'm going, oh, wait a minute, I wonder what God thinks about this. And it's typically when it's gone wrong and I'm upset and I guess I really didn't ask God what he thinks about this. And what you need to understand is we've got this amazing God who is just waiting to invite us for an invitation from us into our decisions. We've got this amazing God that says, I would love to help guide you in your decisions. That's why James, the half-brother of Jesus, actually said, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. I mean, God's not going to be upset if you ask him for guidance, for direction in making a decision. And here's the cool thing, the same God that James was writing about 2,000 years ago, it's the same God that you and I follow today. It's the same God that's speaking to you and saying, I would love to step into your life. I would love to give you wisdom in this decision if you will only ask me. And he's the same God who sees things and the same God who knows things that we will never know or see. I mean, his perspective is so different than ours, which I think is why God said, my thoughts are nothing like your thoughts, and my ways are far beyond anything that you can imagine. For just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. And God says, I would love to step into your decisions. Just ask me. Because I see things that you don't see. I know things that you don't know. I love the way the prophet Isaiah actually describes how God guides us when we invite him into the process. It's interesting. Isaiah is not a book of the Bible that I would want to just pick up and read, I don't think, and yet it's amazing how many things Isaiah says that I go, oh my goodness, I love what he says. And so he says this about how God guides us. He says, your own ears will hear him. Right behind you, a voice will say, this is the way you should go, whether to the right or to the left. I mean, tell me you wouldn't like that as you're making decisions. To think God is right there figuratively behind you going, oh, this way, that way. Oh, no, not that way. Go this way. And I love what Moses says to Joshua. When Joshua was facing some big decisions, Moses said, don't be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord will personally go ahead of you. He'll be with you. He'll neither fail or abandon you. And sometimes we just need to know, God, you're with us. As I'm struggling through what I'm struggling through right now, I'm with you. He's not going to leave you. He's not going to abandon you. I'm encouraged by the words of the Apostle Paul, who says, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Instead, talk to God about everything. Tell God what you need. Thank him for what he's done. Then you'll experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. And tell me you don't want that. A sense of peace beyond what you could possibly understand. And Paul says it's because we've invited God into the decision-making process. We've talked to him about everything. And here's the cool thing. Today, you and I have the very same God as Moses. When he said to Joshua, don't worry, God's with you. He's not going to leave you. We have the very same God as Isaiah, who said if we'll just ask, God will just behind us, he'll say, to the right, to the left. He'll guide us. You and I, we have the very same God as Paul. Paul, who says, look, just talk to God and you will experience a level of peace that you can't even imagine. You can't even explain it. And see, our God hasn't changed. I think sometimes we read stories in the Bible and we think, oh, that was nice. That was thousands of years ago. I just wish it was that way today. And God says, I haven't changed. And I'm offering to guide you and I'm offering to direct you. But God doesn't force his way into our lives. He waits for an invitation. And so it's inviting him in to the process. And here's the thing. I'm pretty sure that my friend never invited God into some of the decisions he was making that led him to inappropriate behaviors. And I'm pretty confident that as I think through bad decisions that I've made, I don't know that I would have made those decisions had I invited God into the process right away. And I'm pretty confident that when we miss out on opportunities, had we asked God and invited him into the situation, the decision we were making, I don't know that we would have missed out on the opportunities that we've missed out on. Had we invited God into our decisions. And so I look at who God is and I go, okay, decisions are important, they matter. God's inviting us to invite him into those decisions. Why wouldn't we want to invite God into those decisions? Why wouldn't we want to invite a God who knows more, sees more, has dealt with more than we will ever deal with in our lives? Why wouldn't we want to invite him into that process? Heavenly Father, God, all of us are facing decisions that sometimes weigh heavy on our lives and we struggle and we try to decide what's the best way to go. And sometimes, Father, we fail to invite you into the decision. If we would just slow down and just talk to you and say, okay, God, what's your perspective on this? What are your thoughts on this? And you created me and you designed me and you know what's best for me. And so why would we not invite you into that process? God, thank you for the fact that you've led people for thousands of years. And we could look back at people, real people, Moses and Joshua and Isaiah and Paul and James, and realize you led them thousands of years ago, but you're the same God today and you're offering to lead us today. God, may we not miss out on opportunities because we failed to talk to you. May we not find ourselves in bad situations because we didn't invite you into the decision-making process. God, thank you for being an amazing God. Thank you for wanting to be involved in our lives, and I pray in Jesus' name, amen.
I'm calling on the God of Jacob, whose love endures through generations. I know that you will keep your covenant. I'm calling on the God of Moses, the one who opened up the ocean. I need you now to do the same thing for me. Oh, for me. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness. On your faithfulness. Would you stand with us? Let's sing this together. I'm calling on the God of Mary, whose favor rests upon the lowly. things are possible. I'm calling on the God of David, who made a shepherd boy courageous. I may not face Goliath, but I've got my own giants. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness. On your faithfulness. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness. On your faithfulness. Oh, you never change, God. You stay the same. You heard your children, then you hear your children now. You are the same, God. You are the same, God. You answer prayers back then, and you will answer now. You are the same, God. Come on, let's believe this together. Sing it out. Here we go. You were providing then, you are providing now. You are the same God. Come on. You are the same God. You moved in power then, God moved in power now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You were the healer then. You are a healer now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You were a savior then. You are my savior now. You are the same God. You are the same God. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh God, on rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness. On your faithfulness. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you. Oh, I need you, God. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness. On your faithfulness. Oh, we trust you, Jesus. You never change, you stay the same. Oh, we trust you, Lord. You're a firm foundation, God. Oh, we praise
So this week, I hope as you face decisions, I hope as you struggle with issues that involve risk, I hope you invite God into your decisions, and may you experience God's strength and power in your life. The same God that's been active and involved in people's lives for thousands of years. The same God that gives direction and guidance. He says, from behind us, to the right, to the left. The same God, the rock of ages. And I hope that you'll choose to invite him into your decisions this week. And the next week, I actually want to lay out a process that'll help you make good decisions. And I want to give you a model to follow so that you can learn to take wise risks. But today,
if you'd like to pray about anything that's going on in your life, then there are people in the front left corner of each of our rooms that would love to pray with you, and so make your way to the front as the gathering is done, and they'd love to pray with you. Or if you're actually joining us online, you can go to LCBC website at any time and click on the prayer button, let us know how we can be praying for you. But LCBC today, this week, may the Lord bless and protect you. May the Lord smile on you, be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.